Ladies and gentlemen, from the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace and Justice, Deacon Gerald Celente.
Hello, this is Deacon Celente of the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace and Justice. Freedom, peace, justice? We won't talk about that. Nobody does. You think of a thing that they had in America called the Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, no liberty. We're the government. We'll tell you what to do. You follow us. We're your leaders. Life, no, we'll steal the rights from you anytime we want, send you to war. Our life is in your hands. And happiness? No one talks about happiness. You never hear those words. Somebody should read George Washington's farewell address, the first president of the United States. He talks about happiness throughout his farewell address. No one ever talks about happiness, only fear, hysteria, and hate. That's all they sell, and they keep selling. And they keep selling it because they're demonic. And in selling it, what they're doing is they're not only sucking the joy out of our lives, we're going to lose them as well in many different ways. This week, the person playing President of the United States, Joe Biden, said, quote, nuclear Armageddon risk highest since Cuban Missile Crisis. Oh, nuclear Armageddon. Isn't that wonderful? An Armageddon. You worried about climate change? Oh, yeah, that's a big one. How come nobody's talking about nuclear Armageddon? Brought to you by the United States. Nuclear Armageddon? You mean the Nagasaki and Hiroshima? That the United States dropped atomic bombs, nuclear bombs, on innocent people and killed hundreds of thousands of them? And poisoned and ruined the lives of probably millions and millions with all the nuclear fallout? President Biden said Thursday that the risk of nuclear Armageddon is at its highest point since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Biden said that Russian President Vladimir Putin, quote, is not joking when he talks about the use of tactical nuclear weapons, and that he can't imagine the use of a tactical nuclear weapon not leading to, quote, Armageddon. Oh, now that Biden said it's Armageddon, then it is, but of course, when we wrote about it and talked about it, how they came out with studies from different universities that we're going into a new ice age when there's a nuclear war. It'll only last about 2,000 years, so don't worry about it. And the billions of people that will be wiped off the planet. And in Japan this past week, North Korea fired a missile over Japan. So they put on the air raid sirens and told people to go into the bomb shelters. A bomb shelter? Who would want to live after a nuclear bomb destroys life on Earth? And you come out from the shelter or your bomb shelter that you built to live a miserable life? Again, climate change is the big news, but not nuclear war. This is hardly reported when I'm reading you. Well, this, they repeated, they talked about it, but, it's gone in and out of the news. And this is from antiwar.com. Tactical nuclear weapons have smaller nuclear yields with strategic nuclear weapons, but many are comparable to the bombs that the United States dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Quote, I don't there is any such thing as the ability to easily use a tactical nuclear weapon and not end up with Armageddon, Biden said. We have not faced the prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis, end quote. Yeah, the Cuban Missile Crisis. What was that about? The United States moving missiles, nuclear missiles, into Turkey aimed at Russia. So what did Russia do? You say, okay, you have nuclear weapons aimed at us, we're going to bring them down to Cuba and aim them at you. So Kennedy said, okay, let's call it even. We'll take our weapons out, you take your weapons out, have a nice day, and that was the end of it. But not now. We have the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, also said on Thursday, he called on NATO to launch a, quote, preemptive strike on Russia to prevent Moscow from using nuclear weapons. Quote, this is Zelensky. What should NATO do? Exclude the possibility of use of nuclear weapons by Russia? But the most important, I am again addressing the international community, is how it was before February 24th. Preventative strikes, so that they know what will happen if they use a nuke, Zelensky said, and not the opposite, waiting for Russia to strike and saying, oh, that's how you are? Now you can take it from us. Reconsider how you apply pressure. The order of application. In response, Moscow said that Zelensky was trying to spark a world war. The president was speaking about the period. Yep. Zelensky has previously called for the United States and NATO military intervention in the conflict. Earlier in the war, Zelensky pushed hard for Western powers to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which would have required shooting down Russian airplanes and bombing surface-to-air systems inside Russia. So he's moving the war into Russia. The war keeps heating up. You ready? U.S. Special Operation Forces are on the ground in Ukraine. U.S. Special Operation Forces are on the ground in Ukraine as part of a broad covert operation that includes CIA personnel, the Intercept reported on Wednesday, citing unnamed U.S. intelligence and military officials. The report said that the U.S. clandestine operations inside Ukraine, quote, are now far more extensive than they were earlier in the war, when United States intelligence officials were fearful that Russia would steamroll over the Ukraine army. Several current and former intelligence officials said, quote, there is a much larger presence of both CIA and U.S. Special Operations personnel and resources in Ukraine than there were at the time of the Russian invasion in February. So let's go back to June. The New York Times reported that there was CIA presence in Ukraine, but it made no mention of U.S. Special Operation Forces. The United States is at war with Ukraine. Special Operation Forces, CIA, they're fighting the Russians. America's at war with the Russians. And so too is NATO. Because the Times also reported that several U.S. allies have special operation troops in Ukraine, including Britain, France, Canada, and Lithuania. World War III has begun, and now they keep talking about nuclear annihilation. These are mentally ill people that are destroying life on Earth, and they're going to destroy all of it at some point if it's not stopped. The Intercept reports that covert operations inside Ukraine are being conducted under a covert presidential finding that indicates President Biden has quietly notified Congress of, quote, a broad program of clandestine operations inside the country. The report said that the finding President Biden is using is an altered version of a finding originally during the Obama administration. Yes, the Obama administration. The person that they gave a Nobel Peace Prize to. Barack, quote, "I'm really good at killing people," Obama. That's his quote in the book Double Down, as he's giving directions to go kill people with drones. The person that gave us the Libyan war and the Syrian war, which the United States is illegally in Syria, and the news is that they just killed some ISIS enemies. Could you imagine if Syria was in the United States trying to kill Syrian enemies? But the United States could go anywhere, any place, and kill anybody they want at any time. Quote, "I'm really good at killing people," Barack Obama. So there you have it. U.S. Special Operation Forces are on the ground in Ukraine. So let's go back to February 10th. The Ukraine war was launched by Russia, which we're totally opposed to, on February 24th. This is 14 days earlier. This is from Forbes magazine. That's a world war, Biden said. He won't send troops to help Americans evacuate Ukraine. President Joe Biden confirmed in an NBC interview, the United States will not send troops to Ukraine to evacuate America if Russia invades, warning a U.S. presence could spark a world war. Now the U.S. has a presence there. The world war has been sparked, but no one's saying this. Biden told NBC anchor Lester Holt he hopes Russian Vladimir Putin is smart enough not to harm American systems, blah, 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 blah. Biden told Holt, quote, "When Americans and Russians start shooting at one another, we're in a very difficult world than we've ever been." The State Department issued a separate warning for U.S. citizens to leave Ukraine immediately, claiming, quote, "The U.S. will not be able to evacuate them in the event Russian military action and invasion, blah, 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 blah." And Biden went on to say that day, "It's not like we're dealing with a terrorist organization. We're dealing with one of the world's largest armies in the world. This is a very difficult situation, and things could go crazy quickly." They've gone crazy quickly. Crazy people are quickly leading us to Armageddon. They're talking about it. Here. Commandos kills senior ISIS figure in Syria, the U.S. says. Commandos, isn't that a nice name? Killers. What God do you believe in that would support this? Buddha? Christ? Muhammad? What God? What God do you believe in? Do you believe in a God? Do you believe in love, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? What's America doing over there killing people? Special Operations Force carried out 2 major strikes against Islamic State in northern Syria on Thursday. So let's say this read. Syrian Special Operation Forces carried out 2 major strikes against, we'll call them pro-American combats in northern America. Oh, that would be terrible. But America could go there and kill anybody they want anytime and make up a story of why they do it. This is very serious. Remember what I said, when all else fails, they take you to war. And the global economy is failing. The last 2 days, the stock market heading back again toward bear territory. Things are getting a lot worse economically. In Italy, they're estimating over 100,000 small businesses and medium-sized businesses will go out of business. Energy prices are skyrocketing. 15,000 businesses just in Berlin they're looking at going out of business. Energy costs are up 147%. And then on Thursday, recession risks are increasing around the world, the IMF warns. Overall, we expect a global output loss of about $4 trillion between now and 2026, according to the IMF. Multiple shocks among them, she writes, this is the head of the IMF, the senseless war changed the economic picture completely. Yep, the senseless war. A war that's been going on, a border war between Russia and Ukraine. As I say, they're taking down the statue of Catherine the Great because they say she hated the Ukrainians. That statue goes back to Catherine the Great, rather, 1750s. This has been going back and forth, a border war between these two people. Senseless war, it's between those two. But they've turned it into a world war by sending scores of billions of dollars to keep bloodying the killing fields. $67 billion the United States has already sent to Ukraine. Did they send $67 billion down to the people whose lives and houses were destroyed in Florida with the hurricane? No, pennies for that. But billions for war. This is very serious. When all else fails, they take you to war. And as I mentioned, the IMF is saying it's failing. And everyone knows it. We're going into the worst economic crisis in modern history. If we don't do something to stop this, it's going to be hell on earth for everyone, even the people hiding in your bomb shelters. So please do what you can. If you're not a fighter for peace, I'm a warrior for the Prince of Peace. Then you'll get what you want. Hell on earth. So please donate to the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace, and Justice. Go to freedompeacejustice.com and do what you can, or do nothing. Because if you believe in God, you believe in peace. If you believe in war, you believe in Satan. You believe in demonics. And demons are in charge, running and ruining our lives now. As Samuel Adams said, one of the founding fathers of the United States, it does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men and women. So we are that tireless minority, and we're doing everything we can to fight this, but we can't do it without you. It just won't happen. Again, united we stand, divided we die. Thank you. Amen and amen.